You are listening to Nerd Best Friends, a podcast that covers the nerdy conversations you're already having, or wish you could. It's the nerdiest thing you'll do this week.
Thank you for listening to Nerd Best Friends. I'm Analese, and I'm here with my best friend, Rob.
Hey, it's me, Rob, your best friend, your super nerd, and your podcast co-host. Nerd Best Friends can be found wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and follow us now. If you would like to support our podcast, subscribe to Nerd Best Friends on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive bonus content. Or if you'd like to give a one-time donation, find us at Nerd Best Friends on Venmo.
It is officially the start of Season 3. This is episode 38. And today we're going to tell tall tales about rolling nerd dice in Las Vegas in our first installment of Nerd Travels. But first, what I like about it.
For this week's What I Like About It, I'm going to pull our attention to a movie called Nimona on Netflix. And this one's been out for a few months at this point. I think it came out at the beginning of the summer while we were at our off season. And it had been recommended to me by some folks in my Monday night D&D group. I also had seen some things when it came out, on social media or whatever. I was like, oh, I should definitely get to that. It looks like guys with armor and swords and monsters. It was much more than that. And now I understand the recommendations and why people were so wild about it. It is a story of an outcasted character who gets framed for murder and is befriended by a monster, which is, he's from the Knights of the Realm who swear to defend the kingdom against monsters. But this monster takes him in and they work together to not exactly be villains at all, but to uncover the conspiracy and try to prove his innocence. It is laugh out loud funny. It is incredibly well done with the art style. Minor spoiler, it throws you for a loop in like the first 5 minutes as it does this whole setup of this medieval time and the hero that slays the dragon. And then all of a sudden it says 1,000 years later. And there's flying cars and skyscrapers, but it's like this medieval high fantasy futurism that totally blew me away as far as the subtleties in which they're able to keep things such as like the Tudor style, high fantasy villages built into the all glass structure of skyscrapers and stuff, right? Like the motorcycles vaguely look like horses, like just cool stuff like that. It's kind of in the background and they don't hang a lampshade on it, but there's just this world building there. And it's a unique story. It's not a hero's journey story. It's something completely different, which I totally loved. Cannot recommend Nimona on Netflix enough. And that's why I like it.
Well, how about some nerd mail?
Nerd mail.
In terms of nerd mail, we have two things going on. The first is I totally got nerd corrected. Thank you, listeners. In last episode, nerdiest thing I did this week, I talked about finally seeing Scream 5 and went on this rant about it, and that we went a whole rant about movies and endings and an end. I actually meant Scream 6, not 5. 6 is there is the newest one, and they actually now have signed on to start the process for 7. It's officially a horror franchise like the rest, and who knows where it's going to go, but totally have
you seen Scream 5?
Yes, I had seen 5. So 5 was a while back, if you remember, back when we had our foreign exchange student as well as my stepdaughter living with us. Scream 5 came out that fall. So I watched 1, 2, 3, 4 with them, and then we went to the theaters to watch Scream 5. So the newest one that I was like, oh, Nev Campbell's not in it. Should I really watch it? And everyone's like, yeah, you should watch it. That was Scream 6. Nerd corrected. But also, we did something different, right, Rob?
Yes. So this week, instead of collecting all the nerd mail from listeners, we reached out to people who are not only maybe listeners of the show, but friends of ours who were part of this episode, part of the nerd travels we're going to talk about. In this week's episode, you'll get to hear from some of those folks that are in our D&D group who made this trip with us and some of their reflections upon it. And I'm really excited about that. That was something cool that we were able to do.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool to hear other voices and hear what they had to say about our nerd travels.
All right, so we are moving on to nerd travels. This is a nerd travel episode. This is something that I have been fighting against since the beginning of this podcast because
you really have.
Annalise likes to go places and do things, and I like to sit at my desk and paint miniatures and be introverted. But somehow we pulled it off, and this was a big one. So, what is nerd travels, Annalise?
Well, the hope is, as our podcast grows, that you and I can go experience things that other nerds experience. Before we started recording today, we were talking about Gen Con and how cool it would be to go to Gen Con one time. Those are the types of nerd travels that I would love to get us involved in. But listeners, Rob absolutely fights me every time I bring it up. So we decided to start slow, and I kind of started to reel in the idea thanks to one of our listeners who let us know about a barcade, I guess is the right.
That's exactly what it is, which is a word,
yeah.
I didn't know.
Right. A barcade well, you knew about barcades because we went to one in Vegas, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was a total like club Vegas atmosphere. My 35th birthday already 10 years ago. We did that, if you can believe it, right? That does not feel like 10 years ago.
Oh,
it was
sure
my 30. It was my 30th.
I could even guess that it was longer than that ago.
It doesn't feel that long ago to me, but I digress. We went to Barcade at that point. That's not in Vegas anymore. I think it used to be called Insert Coins or something like that. We found out a Barcade opened up in a town nearby us. We took a little day trip to go check it out. And that was kind of the start of Nerd Travels, and hopefully not the end, because I would really love for us to go do things. High on my list is still taking you back to Vegas so we can go to the Pinball Hall of Fame. And I think I sent you about a barcade that I learned about that looked really cool. I sent you a link and I don't remember the name of it, but I saw a little ad for it. So there's like a 3-pronged thing we can do out in Vegas that has nothing to do with the Strip and all the masses of people. That being said, you want to talk about our first little mini nerd travel?
Yeah, let's talk about this one. It's funny that you said start slow, because that's where we went. SLO, or San Luis Obispo, California.
Slow, yep.
Where there is a barcade called Up, Down, Left, Right, BA Start. When you look it up on maps, though, it's just BA Start, because you can't put arrow emojis in an address, but the sign
come on,
says,
nerds.
The sign is the whole Nintendo cheat code.
You know that cheat code, up, down, left, right, BA Start.
So we checked this place out. It was incredible and very different from the barcade that you were talking about in Vegas, because this one is a retro arcade. This one has stand-up arcade games just lining the walls, center of the floor. There's a stage there for live music. There is a very full tap of different choices of your craft beer. It's got a little kitchen in there, tons of pinball, tons of arcades, a couple of the cocktail sit-down arcades, the old school like Ms. Pac-Man and stuff like that.
Yes.
Tables to sit in and hang out. Super cool place.
It was really fun. I was very impressed. Behind the stage, we probably stood there for about 15 minutes pointing out everything on this giant mural behind the stage of every 1980s reference you could possibly imagine. And the bar itself was decorated with actual memorabilia high up so people couldn't mess with it. But they had some actual pieces from the 1980s that was either personal collection or they went and sought it out on eBay and stuff. But I mean, there were some original Nintendo pieces up there and just some really cool stuff decorating this whole retro bar. But it was a lot of fun. We had a good time.
It was a lot of fun. And while we were there, just to kind of tell like a fun story, is while we were there, it seemed like it had very recently been the debut of the Foo Fighters pinball machine.
Yes.
Like, they were very excited about the Foo Fighters pinball machine. There was giant posters and banners and, things to bring you over there. There were some dudes in there that were committed to getting high score. Like, you could tell they were real pinball dudes. They kept playing. They kept checking their phone and like logging into some kind of cool app or something. And
they were like logged into the machine and checking online to make sure their scores or their averages or whatever was being updated. That machine has some total connectable content.
Right. So whatever's going on, and we'd have to get our pinball wizard back on the show to figure out, like, when they do these new releases, is this a thing now that they put them in these places and then all over the world, people are now competing for high score? It's not just get your initials at the top of the screen. It's now a global community is what it seemed like.
It's crazy. If you remember, we texted Nancy while we were there and she's like, I totally played it. You should log in and track your scores. And I was like, what? Yeah, it's crazy. And then ironically, just seems to be the thing when I show up to Barcades, it was actually a pinball tournament that evening.
I know. We had been there about 2 hours or so. And finally, somebody, as we were getting ready to leave, came around like passing out flyers. Hey, are you guys here for the pinball tournament? We're like, oh, we were just about to leave.
Yeah. And at work, I think it was a work night. It was a Sunday. Yeah. It was a work night. So like staying until that thing ended and then driving back from SLO really wouldn't have been in our best interest. So we didn't stay, but it was a lot of fun.
But yeah, it looks like, we were probably there on a Tuesday afternoon, but it looks like they probably have some really fun stuff going on during the week and probably on the weekends. Again, there's a stage there. So you imagine there's live performances and you're playing video games, drinking craft beer and having a great time in San Luis Obispo.
And we definitely have some video and pictures to describe all of this, which will be put in our Patreon for subscribers to see. Good times.
All right. Well, that was a mini nerd travel. You did get me out of the house for that one. But the bulk of our episode today is to talk about our maxi trip, our big nerd travel experience.
So let's talk a little bit first about the background that got us to Las Vegas to play D&D. This was a 3-year adventure that started in 2020 with a group of people. On my end, I just remember we talked about, playing every other week, same group of people. At least 5 of the 7 had to be present in order to play the adventures. Yeah. And we were going to try to take it from level 1 to level 20, which at the time I didn't know how rare that was. I was like, all right, that sounds cool. That means we're going to be playing for a while. So we picked our characters, started out, and we played just about every other Wednesday for 3 years.
It did. It was kind of pandemic time and we were just going to run one shots. I had a bunch of people that had reached out to me and said, hey, I hear people are starting games online and did you want to run something? And of course, I've got a ton of ready to go one shots. Like I'll buy PDFs on different Patreons or I'll collect books and things that have different adventures. I probably still have 100 that I may never play, but it's enjoyable reading for me to grab one of these books and read about the world building and the setting and stuff and just kind of get ideas for other places and those kinds of things. So there was no shortage of those one shots. It was like, sure, maybe we do this every Wednesday. And I was like, that sounds like a big commitment because I don't see anybody else stepping up to run these games. How about every other Wednesday? So it became the every other Wednesday pretty quick after we had done some of the one shots and stuff. And yeah, we had started with about 8 or 9 people invited every week and just hey, if we can get 4 or 5, we're on and we'll run the game. And as we went on through week after week after week, we noticed there was kind of a core group that kept showing up. Yeah. So why not make it a campaign?
I don't quite remember the one shots that prefaced it. I was so new to D&D and it was the beginning of the pandemic. I was kind of being thrown in and learning the mechanics of playing at the same time. So,
if you don't mind talking about that, because that is an interesting story to have never played the game before, different than someone like me who grew up playing it and some of the people in that group played when they were teenagers and stuff. D&D at its core to me is a cooperative game of people sitting around the table. When you get into it, there's always someone there who they want extra players, so they invite you to join and they'll sit next to you and point at your character sheet and kind of explain how things are going. But yours and some of the other people in this group, their experience playing Dungeons and Dragons, this cooperative tabletop game, was sitting alone in a room.
So there's caveats to that, right? Like I definitely hung out with you and Maria and our friends while you would host these big games on a Saturday. I'd hang out and munch on food and, something might be on the TV while y'all were playing and I'd stand there and watch a little bit. And I'd been around the game a lot. I did play 2 in-person games before we got to shutdown in March of 2020. Okay. So the first one was a really introductory one with you and Andrew. That wasn't online. And I think it might have been the Stranger Things one you got me when I first moved back, the starter set.
Did we get that in? I kind of feel in my memory that was online.
It might have been online, but I know I played one with just you and Andrew where you guys showed me mechanics. It might not even have, it was one Andrew ran and it was the ice one.
Oh, like a Christmas, like a holiday, Christmas winter one, right?
Yeah. Right. And that was second. The first one was playing in person at listener Juliana's house. for New Year's Eve. So we all got together
yes.
New Year's Eve 2019 going into 2020
Okay.
and we played in person. The problem for that game for me was it was awkward for me. I didn't understand the role playing. So I just I used a name for my character that already existed. I think it was Jin Urso because I couldn't think of another name. I was just
Nice.
like a warrior or something. And I just very loosely followed the sheets. I don't know. The game was awkward. I don't recall anyone saying like, oh, here's how you look at the sheets. And you were running it. So, and I was sitting on the other side of the table. Yeah. It would have been like you or Andrew, but you guys were on the other side. And I was just kind of
think Andrew was helping his mom.
Yeah. And you were all sitting on the other side of the table for sure. So I didn't have someone, we'll talk about later about this game in Vegas. I didn't have that same level of interaction, but also my understanding of the game wasn't very high, right? I've only played video games and I'd only played solo player games where I'm making all the decisions, and the most tactical decision I can make is to try to win the game. So the whole, you have a character and you need to think within your character, and the role play bit really didn't jive with me until we were online and playing Masks, right? So playing Masks with Andrew running that game.
Role play.
That's
system.
when I really started to understand role play, and especially having a character in that game that wasn't super weaponry and attacky. I had to start thinking, what would my character do with the small skills she has in order to impact this scenario we're in? That's what really got me thinking like a character. So I did play those 2 games in person, but they were very touch and go, very shaky. And then we shut down. That was December and January. And then we shut down.
Yeah.
And that's when I started the every other Wednesday scenarios. And then that turned into the long stemmed game that we're talking about today. And then at some point you were like, hey, why don't you get more gameplay in? We meet on every other Saturdays. We can use another player. It's just 3 of us. We can use another player. And so I started doing the every other Saturdays. So my experience has totally been learning that role playing and seeing D&D only on one-dimensional screen. I don't know that I would have liked it the other way around. I understand now the pull and the draw and the community aspect of playing an in-person game. And it was so deeply impactful after all these weeks and weeks and weeks of only playing online. Understanding the difference now is more poignant for me versus the other way around. Like you were saying, it was just always in person, that you know the mechanics of the game and you're just playing. I don't know. I got hooked on D&D in this manner and appreciate it in person a lot more because of that.
Just to finish up that thought I was having. Tell me if this rings true for your memory. The Stranger Things starter box that Wizards of the Coast put out, it's got like a mega dungeon where you're in kind of like the upside down or whatever. And we had looked at the maps together and planned out building the giant map. That was when I had the big game table in the middle of the floor. We measured it and stuff, and we're like, it's going to cover the whole table. How cool would that be? I'm going to get to 3D printing so that we can make this awesome, crazy dungeon. And that was probably during winter break, probably right at the beginning of the new year. And then that just got totally wiped out.
Even to be very specific. We played it online. And you know what? That was valuable to me too, because no matter how many hints you dropped, I wasn't good enough at role playing yet to understand that this NPC you brought forward was intended to do a little side quest to, make the game a little bit longer and maybe give us, some kind of little reward for completing that side quest until we finished the game and we talked through it. And
you didn't want anything to do with Princess What's-Her-Face.
No, I was like, you're in the way, right? Because I'm so tactical thinking. Like a video game, I need to get to the next step, and you're not the next step. You're just Grand Theft Auto. You're just in the way. Let me punch you in the face so I can go do my thing. Right. That's where my brain was until I understood role playing. But I remember taking your big giant game table you used to have and taking dungeon tiles you already had, because you looked at the whole 3D print. Like, I don't need to print out 1,000 pieces. I have most of the stuff already. And we tried to put together all of the thing. You did some math on how many more you'd have to make to complete it. And then we got to shut down. So we did play that one online. That one would have been bonkers, as giant as that one was. But who knows how much I would have gleaned from it, not really understanding D&D at that time.
So before we describe the campaign, we do have a guest audio file, Kim, who plays the character Holiday, which, joke name for a new player. This is what you're stuck with for 20 levels, but that's what you decided to do. Holiday the Christmas elf was what she came to the table with and was stuck with, my God, for 3.5 years.
Hello, my name is Kim Ortega. and I'm also known as Holiday. First name Holly, last name Day, elf from the north. My favorite part of gameplay has to be, okay, there's two. When Luther went into he went into a cave or room before me, and this is when I was still a young wizard, and I threw a fireball in there and just burnt him to smithereens, lit his cigarette at the same time. And then I think the other favorite time was any time that Peter fell into a pile of poop. I mean, literally a poo room. So yes, those were Holiday's favorite. From Holiday, I would like to say, I hope you have very many lovely days ahead.
All right, so that was Kim. You got a little taste of Holiday and what that was all about. It was a Russian accent for some reason. Christmas elf, North Pole.
From Russia.
Russian accent. There was an underlying theme of anti-capitalism throughout.
Yes, it was amazing.
Right? Like fantasy Santa Claus gives gifts. He doesn't charge you for them. I don't know.
It was good stuff. And she stuck with it the whole campaign. So it's good work. And she talked about two particular moments that were funny and memorable. One of them, the character of Peter. Character Peter was supposed to be our sly, stealthy dude. Mm-hmm. And the first half of these levels, he rolled so bad that he's falling into ditches and failing his stealth checks. And one of those, he fell into a unfortunate pile of grossness.
Refuse.
Well, you know what was great about that? That was a really great team role-playing moment around that because we kept ragging him for smelling for the rest of the level. I thought that was really cool. And then the other one about the character Luther, who's hard-nosed cowboy.
Paladin.
That's right, a paladin. Thank you.
Coming from a background where he had a criminal background, where he traveled with a gang of outlaws.
That's right.
And decided to try to work towards his spiritual redemption and be a better person.
And the person playing that character had a pack of stage cigarettes.
That's right.
When we first started the campaign, and would chew on them and then not be able to use them after a while. One of the early adventures, he had one in his mouth and Kim did some spell that created explosion and exploded in his face because he had a lit cigarette. And then she went,
cute.
Oops. Good stuff. But let's talk about the campaign, Rob. I know this was your dream and a chance to be super creative out of the book. I just know this was something you had thought of for a very long time. I'll even date back to when we were teaching marching band together and you wanted to do a Western themed marching band show. I think you've been thinking about this for a very long time. So tell us about the campaign.
I am a sucker for Westerns and Western tropes. I think even if my D&D games have nothing to do with actual literal interpretations of the West, I tend to lean towards plots and characters that are white hat good guys and black hat bad guys. And, it all culminates in some big showdown. It's just kind of how I'm wired with that. For this campaign, like we said, it has started out with just doing one shots every week. So I had collected all of those and started cataloging them and pulling out the books and kind of figuring out which authors I thought had some good stuff. And I had just been poring over them. So they were all kind of in my mind. So when we decided to do this campaign, it was like, okay, well, I want to just stitch together all these one shots. I'm not going to go buy an off the shelf campaign.
Yeah.
I've got all this stuff. I think I can figure it out. I've got several one shots for every level of play. This was the end of 2020 was when this happened. Mandalorian season 2 was hitting hard and we were loving that. This was also near the release. I think it was in November where Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out. And that is a D&D book that was a player supplement that had some different subclasses for the different classes in D&D. And there is a picture in there of a dragonborn paladin and he's standing there in a leather duster and he's got a shield and the shield has a sheriff's star on it and a wanted poster hanging on it. And that was that moment. I saw that character and everything came together. It was, oh, that's the sheriff. sheriff of this little town, and he is something special. And maybe he's like a level 20 dude who's retired and now is kind of sheriff of this sleepy little town and sends them off on these adventures. So now I'm looking through all of these one shots and figuring out like which ones can I just kind of skin in and around this little sleepy Western town. And that's what it was. Sheriff Coleman and this little town, and you guys come in and he gives you jobs. And at first it's kind of jobs for pay. And then it was about bringing you into kind of a bigger picture and bigger responsibilities and those kinds of things. I felt like it worked out really well. So when you say like, yeah, this was a dream, it's like, yeah, like everything kind of came together right at the right moment. I was like, this is the fantasy Western D&D game that I can do. That's how it went.
It was really great starting at level 1, and these random people end up in this town, this fictional town of Morsane, coming together to make a little bit of money at first, and then you introduced kind of the bad guy.
Right. So
Cairo?
That was, yes, Mr. Cairo. I had titled the campaign The Outcasts of Morsane right. Being the little town. And as everybody brought their characters, they were all from somewhere else or not, right? So there was the outlaw that came in this town trying to escape his past. There was the monk that was going out and seeing the world and learning about things that had traveled here from a faraway land. There was the elf who had come to, the desert to seek warmer climates from the North Pole. And there was even, Michael's character was the only one from Morsane,
right?
But had grown up in the Thieves Guild and now wanted to detach himself away from that and align with Sheriff Coleman. Yeah. So yes, as we went through after like level 3, level 4, I'm like, okay, this needs to become something bigger. We need to have that B plot, right? So if you're looking at a television series that's episodic, right? Anything from the 90s that we used to watch, Star Trek or MacGyver or whatever, everything is Monster of the Week kind of thing, right? It's episodic, but they'll keep putting in little things in the B plot for an overarching story in the season, right? Buffy the Vampire Slayer did a great job.
This is the Joss Whedon model that everyone else started to.
Yeah, exactly. So that was where, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to do that. I got to figure out something like that. For whatever reason, it was pandemic time. So we were doing a lot of like watching movies and hanging out. One of my favorite movies, period, is The Maltese Falcon. And so we had happened to be watching The Maltese Falcon with Andrew, showing it to him for the first time. And I'm looking around at these and I'm like, God, Mr. Cairo is just such a little jerk.
He's a punk.
What if he's the best? What if he's the big bad? And then it all just put into place. And you guys reacted perfectly, not knowing that was going to be the thing. Mr. Cairo shows up and like the first thing that happens is Luther like pushes him out of the way and he like falls down into the dirt. And I'm like, oh, this could not have worked any better.
Well, you know what I remember about that is that I missed the game that Cairo was introduced. So when I came back the next week, everyone else was already gone on the adventure. You had me start in Morsane with Sheriff Coleman going, where is everyone at? Whatever. I can't even remember the reason why, but I had to catch up to where they were. Cairo walks in and starts talking mess about my friends. And without saying a word, because, my Dragonborn monk character, me taking the monk idea seriously, stoic. Stoic, didn't talk much, just turned around and socked him in the face. And I remember seeing Adam's screen. He was just celebrating and I had no idea why. I'm like, you don't talk mess about my friends.
Yeah, so he's just this little weaselly dude. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna say it was such a good role playing by me that everybody wanted to just hate on this poor guy.
He's the voice and everything. I think the only more annoying voice was than Cairo was the Stitch. Man, the Lich? Stitch? The Lich? The really, really annoying voice of the thing that almost killed us all when we were in that dungeon and stuck. The Lich?
And then came back at the end. You're talking about Agron?
Yes,
Agron is
with
the
that
Lich,
annoying
he talks
voice.
in the Skeletor voice. He's, you can't have a Lich without the Skeletor voice.
Lich, there we go.
And we had a great time.
Speaking of Adam and Luther.
Sure. He sent in a message as well, right?
He did. And you know what? Adam is so experienced with D&D. He was like on par with you, on par with Andrew when we play, just longtime D&D player. And he actually went an extra the extra mile, I guess you would say, with his redemption paladin, in that he started to keep a journal of his character and his character's path to redemption and the things he's feeling. When we got to the final game eventually and he shared that journal with us, it was really profound.
What a cool idea. And he did this not knowing, like, we didn't go in from day one being like, oh yeah, someday we're going to have a big event where we all play in person and you should have this physical prop or whatever. Like, this was just, he was so invested in that character that's what he wanted to do. And he started keeping this version in Luther's voice and writing in it. And one of the things that he did is things started ramping up and getting difficult, right? Like, once we started hitting like level 15 and the stakes seemed to be getting a little bit bigger and the monsters seemed to be getting a little bit dangerous, his character gave your character his journal. Don't read this.
He was close to death in one of the 15 or 16, level 15 or 16. And he had his character have I don't know if obsession's the right word, but a high level of respect for Arkul, my Dragonborn monk, that Luther gave Arkul the journal in the event that he dies.
I think there was a character arc too there where he had completely disabandoned his old ways. He had realized that what he had been looking for this whole time was the family that he didn't get a chance to have because he had run with those outlaws, and now he had found it. And he would, a paladin is a tank class. You're going to get up there and stand in the line of fire and absorb damage. And I think he leaned into that role play wise by being like, I will die for these people. And the way things are going, that's probably going to happen. So here, you better take my journal.
Yeah, it was great. Well, and he actually, he did something a little different and he sent us pieces of his journal. So let's listen to Adam's message.
A few weeks later. What in the name of sweet fantasy Christ am I doing here? Weeks have gone by and I am still here working for the sheriff. To what end? Perhaps I've actually begun to care for the ones I fight alongside. Elf is a poor conversationalist, but he nearly always comes through when we need him. Frau and Holiday are beginning to come into their own as they gain more control over their skills and powers. I truly cannot imagine traveling without the improvised songs of mariachi, which both soothe and invigorate. Plus, I have learned words from her native tongue, such as huevos, which means eggs, and pendejo, which she has told me means great individual. Peter is both smart and skillful, though perhaps not wise. In the span of a few weeks, I have seen him skillfully assassinate a giant scorpion, and also dive headfirst into twice. Peter is also the same age that he would have been. Arkul, as ever, is inscrutable, but they are always standing by my side whenever danger presents itself. I believe if anyone were to judge me or my actions, Arkul is the only one, perhaps, who could do so truly impartially. Oh, we also met Holiday's elf friends. They were going on about unburdening the working class from the fetters of capitalism and the tyranny of the oligarchy. Strange folk. Nice, though.
I mean, that's Luther in the flesh.
That's Luther. That's Adam.
Amazing.
And he committed.
He committed 100%. And a lot of the times, because he was around people who were new to D&D, he was carrying the role playing, especially early on. I remember that. There was a lot of as the DM and him, because the rest of us were, and I guess, Michael playing Peter.
But this was only the second time Michael had ever played, or actually was this the first? I think this was Michael's first D&D game with us. He may have tried to run for his friends before shutdown and stuff, but I met Michael. Michael's quite a bit younger than us. I actually met Michael when he was a senior in high school, and we were on a school trip. It's crazy, like A random equals Z equals W to do this, but my son is the same age as some of my cousin's daughters, and their school was going on the social studies trip to Washington, D.C. and New York. And so we jumped into that school district's trip because we knew them, and the teacher in charge of that trip brought his teenage son along to do the trip. And we did this whole thing, and there was a big group of us. And on our way home, while we were waiting on like a couple hours of layover for our next flight, we're just sitting there, and I happened to notice Michael, which honestly, I didn't even remember his name. I hadn't talked to him the whole trip because he was with his family and I was with the kids and stuff. But I looked over his shoulder, and he was sitting there on his phone watching Critical Role on YouTube. And I'm like, hey, dude, you watch Critical Role? He's like, yeah. I was like, do you play D&D? He's like, oh, I'd really like to, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God.
Here we go.
come here, we got one. And we were saying like, oh my gosh, I wish we had figured this out a week ago. We could have been playing D&D on the bus.
You could have played somewhere in the hotel one night. Yeah.
But,
well, then he ends up being a band nerd like us. And you had that in common
senior,
as well.
He was
Yeah.
in the marching band. He was in the drum line, just a ton of stuff in common with us. And so I got his contact information. And when we started doing those one shots, I just sent him a message. Hey, you still feel like playing D&D? And he jumped in and good for him. Cause he jumped in as like an 18-year-old to all of us.
Yes.
and we're extra.
A bunch of old people, according to him. It's really fun in a few ways. So listeners, if you've done the math, that does mean that Michael turned 21 briefly before our trip to Las Vegas. So that was really fun as well, to be his first trip to Vegas as a 21-year-old without his parents. But also, we were nice to him. We weren't crazy. We're all too old for that. We also, to say, I'm going to throw out there, Adam, who plays Luther, is our former student. He was in
that's right.
my marching, exactly in my band.
10 years younger than me. Like 10 years and 4 months or something younger than me.
So what a cool, talk about It's a Small World and circle of people and how you met Michael. We have Adam in there, who is a former student. We have Josh and Juliana in there, you met Juliana through work and got to know them. And we had Alice in there, who is
a friend of Adam's, and Kim, who is a friend of Juliana's. And,
Right. Talk about band of misfits. But man, Adam really, really committed to Luther, and it ended up being really awesome. Let's talk about the actual trip.
Yeah. So something, 3.5 years later, we're going to finish this thing. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were a lot of those Wednesday nights where we were tired and people didn't show. And that was something that I did from the onset. It was a 7-player game. Yeah. And it was and I said from the beginning, if we've got 5, we're on, because trying to manage 7 different families and different adults, is really challenging. So that is kind of like a tip there. For even if you're doing your in-person game or whatever it is, you might want to think about having a rule of thumb that says, okay, I've got this many players. We do that on our Tuesday night game that Michael runs too. There's 5 players in this game. If we've got 3, we go. Right. So be on time, show up, because if we've got 3, we're going and you're missing out. Anyway.
Yeah. And as we progressed and I want to say somewhere around level 17, I think you and I started talking off the game, how cool it'd be to be in person. You had this vision about being in person for the final level 20 and what that would look like. And between the two of us, we came up with a couple of different ideas. Somewhere, I want to say in the level 18 game, maybe level 19, because that level 19 took us extra amount of time. Took us 4 or 5 sessions. So going every other week, it took us 2 months to do level 19. So somewhere around there, we presented this idea to the team. Said we're going to try to make it as cost effective as possible. And we actually picked a date. We picked a weekend that everyone could be available in July. And then you backwards planned on what it would look like to get to the end of level 19 in time to get there in Vegas in July.
It was totally doable. It was the level 20 game just can't go past 3 sessions. Even if it went to 4, the next week we would go play, the level 19 one. Yeah.
And there was padded time. I think we actually had a Wednesday or 2 off before we met in person.
Yeah. Which was great for my prep.
Right. Yeah. And great for everyone to have a little bit of a break too. These were 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. games. So that's the whole tired. There was one session, Kim passed out asleep on her couch. Poor thing on her screen. We're on. She's just flat on her couch and out. So Rob's like, I'm going to turn her camera off and we'll see if she wakes up. There were times that I remember I kept my earbuds in and I leaned back in my chair and started to fall asleep. There were definitely some rough weeks. Yeah. So the 2 weeks off was good.
There were a few, not too many, but there were definitely, I canceled some games too, just being middle of the week, headache, just tired and stressed from work. And I'm just I gotta call in sick, you guys. I need to go to bed before, because that's the other thing about it. I don't, the game ends at 11. I'm not asleep by 11:05.
No.
Running these games, there's a lot of energy you got to put into it. Yeah. It's another hour of winding down to be able to get to a place where I can go to sleep. And a lot of times, I'll dream about things role-playing game when we do that too.
Well, there's definitely like on level up games, when we leveled up at the end of the session, we'd still be in the Zoom till 11:30, almost midnight, talking about like what we get in this level and what should, and that was helpful. That's a little bit of that piece of playing around the table. Hey, what, this between this option and this option, what would be better for my character? And that like having those conversations happened via Zoom. So that did happen a little bit. We had a few ideas. We're both big fans of Firestone Brewery. So we thought, what if we were in Paso Robles? I almost said Paseo Nuevo, like we're going to the mall. That's the name of a mall in Santa Barbara. But we thought about going to Paso Robles where there's Firestone and we can get a hotel and maybe a little conference room. We talked about some Airbnb options and we were looking for quite a while. And I took ownership of this. This is the work I did as a band director for 19 years. It's easy for me to come up with an itinerary, but kind of took in what you had wanted out of the weekend, which is the parameters were
a big fun dinner,
cool dinner with the team on Friday, a good place to play all day Saturday, even if we break it up into segments and have like breakfast, have lunch, do something that night together, whether we're like just hanging around and having some drinks or going to a barcade or just doing something fun Saturday night. And then everyone goes home Sunday. So those were kind of the parameters. And we went around in circles. Come to find out, hotels in Central California were just out of whack in terms of prices. You remember we were looking even like at a Motel 6 was like $300 a night, and Paso Robles didn't make any sense. And we
had the varying, and we have a varying group that had to travel different distances and those kinds of things as well. So it's not, everyone wasn't in the position of like, oh yeah, $500 a night, sure, no problem. Like we had to find a middle, we had to find something that could work for everybody.
On my end, with the move to Northern California, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to do it at all. Was able to make it work, but somewhere along the lines, we had spent some time on one of the Wednesdays. Just, what about this? Let me text my friend that has this Airbnb. And like, we were just going in circles. I don't remember. It might have been Kim. I don't remember who brought up Vegas. Why don't we just meet in Vegas?
Yeah. Like who does this all the time, and is totally set up for this kind of thing and prides itself on being cheap so that you go and spend your money gambling. Vegas.
And that we all had a way to get there that was relatively simple and cheap. Right. Versus
everybody in the group does live in California, although California is a big place and we pretty much, from Ukiah to San Diego, we pretty much, and everywhere in between, we pretty much have it covered.
Yep. Ukiah, Fresno, Santa Barbara, Camarillo, San Diego. Am I missing anything? I think that's everybody.
Well, Josh, who is in our campaign, works, he's a firefighter, he's a fire captain. Yeah. And so a lot of times when he would play in between calls in the middle of the night from the fire station, which is in another city altogether, in Oxnard.
Another city south of Santa Barbara would be like, well, gotta go, guys. Like
that happened a lot. We'd be right in the middle and he'd be like, oh, getting a call. And then
gotta go.
Disappear. Gotta go.
So Vegas came up, and it is actually the perfect location for this culminating game. And since I lived there for 9 years, again, I had already taken over the planning. I decided to throw out some of what's considered quote unquote locals casinos, because they are built in neighborhoods. They're not on the strip. Because I know we weren't looking necessarily for the big, Vegas strip and, $500 a night.
That's kind of one of the things we all decided was like, yes, it's Vegas, but this weekend should be about the game and it should be about us spending time together. Right.
And so I picked some of what were my favorite casinos, quote unquote locals casinos again, because when it's in your neighborhoods or in an area of your neighborhood, it's where the good restaurants are, it's where the movie theaters are, it's where the bowling alleys are. So if you want to do those things, you go to that casino to go to the movie theater. When I lived in that area of Vegas, that's where we went to nice dinners, or we went to bowl. We went to go to the spa. So I picked, and we went and did a bunch of pricing. And something I learned is that hotels, I don't know if this is everywhere, but hotels in Vegas won't charge you for a rental of a conference room. What they will do is say a per person price off their catering. So then we started talking about what this looked like. How can we come up with a package and a budget, and what are the rooms? And so we came up with an amount that everyone would pay, and it would pay for 2 nights of hotel, and it would pay for all day in this conference room with a breakfast that we'd have together as a team, and then some snacks in between, and a catered lunch, like a plated lunch they actually served us. That was a 3-course meal, and then more snacks in the afternoon, and we would just be in this room and play. So, this is what Vegas does. And even though they had like the WGI board of directors taking up like 4 rooms, and they had like some wedding stuff, and they had some way big tens of thousands of dollars reservations that weekend. We were not.
Donald Trump was there that weekend. He came to the steak dinner and made our steaks late.
He made our steaks late, and we got every free dessert on the menu.
Thanks, it was worth it, but oh my God.
UFC was there for the weekend,
Right.
but we went with Red Rock Hotel and Casino. I feel it's worthwhile to shout them out because it had everything. And once we got to that hotel, we literally did not have to leave. Fancy steak dinner the night before there at the hotel. There's a spa there. There's the gambling. There's bars. There's the sports book. There's the movie theater, the casino. There's just something for everyone. You really did not have to leave in the pools and all that stuff. Yeah. Everyone took advantage of what they wanted to for the weekend. And we got to be together as a team and not worry about let's Uber to here. Who's going to drive? Who's going to be the sober driver? So we got to the hotel and we were there and we got to just be together.
And they maxed it out, right? Like our game, so kind of an inside joke of the game. Like I mentioned, I named this campaign the Outcasts of Morsane, which I felt like was a really good title.
It
At
is.
some point as we got to high levels and we had Juliana plays the cleric of the party and it's a life cleric. You guys decided there was nothing, once you can bring back people from the dead with revivify or resurrection or all these crazy spells, you're like, team no consequences. There's no consequences for us. Do what you want. And so you guys usurped the title of my campaign and to spit in my eye. There's nothing you can do to make this game dangerous or intense, Rob.
You changed it on Roll20 to say team no consequences.
I did.
So I had actually forgotten that the game was called Outcasts of Morsane. So you also bought into our little inside joke of Team No Consequences. So that's what was on all the display boards when you're in the meeting area. Team No Consequences, room this, and a marquee coming in the room.
I think it said Team No Consequences, and then the subtitle was level 20, Dungeons and Dragons level 20 finale or something.
Finale, yes.
It was clear what it was because people talked to us about it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and also because, we had to walk out of our room to the bathrooms, and because UFC was there, they had tons of not security, but their red coat employees were there, checking to make sure you were a guest of the hotel and stuff. And we kept walking out in our costumes to go to the bathroom. So a lot of people chatted us up, but I did that purposefully. I think you're right. It was level 20 D&D finale or something like that was the second little sub line there. So, but Red Rock hooked it up. They treated us like we were their $100,000 client, and we were not anywhere close to that with just 7-8 people. Man, food was good. I maxed it out. It was my only kind of vacation this summer because we were moving. That took a lot of money and time. So this was my one little trip for the summer. So I got there super early Friday. I got myself a massage. I maxed it out in the spa. I remember I'm playing blackjack and I hear Holiday behind me in Russian, and I turn around and Michael and Kim are there, and and then as people started to trickle in, it was just so much fun.
Yeah, that was awesome. They had met at the airport, so they got to have and that was the first time they ever met in person. They met at the airport and shared a ride over to the hotel so that they could catch up and get to know each other, which was awesome. Something I don't think we mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about the setup for this game. At some point, people on Zoom during 2020 when we were playing this game started showing up in costume for this game.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know how that happened.
Well, I know why. You gave inspiration to the first person who did it.
That's gotta be it. So was it Adam who wore a cowboy hat to the table?
Something, yeah. I think it was Adam.
Look at the
first.
commitment.
You know what? I think it was also, we haven't talked about Alice, who played Mari Achi, right? And she came in full Dia de los Huertos face paint and a sombrero one game. Yes.
Yeah. And so then it was people were spending money. People are getting armor and sarapes and hats and vests and holsters and all kinds
I did it to make my best friend happy because I knew you were going to lose your stuff the first time I showed up on camera with a dragon mask on.
With a dragonborn mask on.
Yep. And then I couldn't wear it all the time because my glasses didn't fit. So, but yeah, we started being in costume and everyone brought their costumes for being in that room on Saturday. But you know what? The big steak dinner at the fancy steakhouse was so much fun.
Yeah.
Gigantic bill of all of us just eating our hearts out and sharing some food, some fun. You with your, I dreamt of a tomahawk steak. Had yourself a tomahawk steak.
And you guys were super sweet. I did not know this was going to happen, but the group picked up my dinner tab as a thank you for the game, which I thought was super cool. I promise I was going to get the tomahawk steak either way.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had talked about it for weeks, so we knew that was the thing, but we really actually tried to pay for your whole thing, but that proved to be a little bit much for everybody. But, you spend a lot of money and time in preparation, especially all that painting you had to do to prepare for that level 20 and 3D printing the town of Morsane, and you maxed it out. So why wouldn't we treat you to dinner? So that was a team agreement that we were going to pay for your dinner. And man,
well, let's get
Steakhouse
into the experience and let's get into the level 20 game. We've talked a lot about what kind of led us there, but I think we've got some audio from Josh and Juliana. Josh and Juliana are a married couple who were in this campaign as well, and they sent something in too, right?
Yeah, they sent in, and let's listen to them now.
After 3 years together, our troupe of intrepid adventurers gathered in Las Vegas for one final adventure. It was spectacular for many reasons. Many of these people have only ever seen each other on little Zoom screens. Some had never met face to face, but there were hugs all around when we were eventually in the same room together. Rob and Analese created the perfect event. We had an area large enough for our whole team, as well as a never-ending supply of freshly catered food and drink to keep our energy up. The whole weekend was a chance to spend time together while enjoying a common diversion. Rob, as the DM, was prepared for every contingency and had the mini, music, and response for every eventuality of play. This was the most fun I had ever had in a D&D game. I was able to really dive into my character much more than I ever could when playing on screen. We wore costumes, used voices, read chants, and even brought mascots. I wish I could say let's do it again, but I don't know if the stars will ever align in such a way for a second time. If they do, count me in.
My name is Josh Massey, and on Team No Consequences, I play an elvish rogue based on the Clint Eastwood Man with No Name character called the Elf with No Name. And my favorite part of the ending in Las Vegas would actually have to be when we walked into the room and saw everything laid out and were able to play in person again. It was just amazing to be able to sit down over an actual table and see everyone and participate and just have a great time. We were talking about it earlier, but if I had tried to tell 15-year-old me sitting at the Carl's Jr. around the table, just staying for hours playing games for free soda refills, that we would be playing in an executive conference room in a resort in Las Vegas fully catered, I probably wouldn't have believed it. So thank you very much, Analese, for putting all that together. It truly was an amazing experience.
Thank you to Juliana and Josh, to Adam, to Kim for sending us in these messages about their experience.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one whose dreams came true and had a D&D experience, just like Josh said. I used to sit on the floor playing D&D at my friend's house until late in the night, and we would joke about how much, we would call it rug butt. If you sit on a carpet long enough, your legs get indented with the pattern of the carpet, and we would just sit there and eat fish crackers and Coca-Cola for hours and hours and hours until till the middle of the morning. No idea that we could have an experience like this, like you said, with just that Vegas level of service and making you feel important.
They really made us feel important. But let's talk about the game. How did the game go?
So for the level 20 campaign, for the level 20 game, I had to prep it a little bit differently because we looked at the itinerary and it was okay, breakfast is at 9, lunch is at 12, snack at 2:30 or something like that, 3:00. So there were just these chunks that we were going to get to play. We didn't, of course, have just unlimited time. That was something we even talked about, was do we get a huge room? Is my room a big suite that's big enough for a party? We just have the room forever and can play. It was no, we went with this way and it's going to be awesome. But that means you've got a 3-hour chunk, a 90-minute chunk, and a 90-minute chunk. And that's it for the game. Mm-hmm. So I designed this one, and this one was not a one-shot from a book that I had stolen from somewhere, right? So I did this one in 3 acts. And how can I tie up all the loose ends, get us to the boss fight with Mr. Cairo and the big reveal about the sheriff in the town and give that satisfying ending. And so that's what I did. I just did, okay, Act 1, we're going to introduce all of these threads. Act 2, we're going to fight. And Act 3 is when maybe somebody's going to die, because I'm just going to keep piling it on until,
right.
for the big finale. And then it was this idea of, well, of course, it has to happen in Morsane. If we're playing an in-person game, that means terrain, that means miniatures, that means maps, all this stuff. So I was like, oh, I can get away with only making one map if the map is good enough. And so it's like, I'm building this little town. So Printable Scenery has an awesome set of an old West town. It had a sheriff's office and a saloon and a general store and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, perfect. I'll get that, and just started printing every day and painting up all of this stuff. I had a Kickstarter from Dungeons and Lasers that had just a whole box of fit together build plastic miniatures, plastic models of townspeople. And it's got a ton of them, from the gravedigger to the baker to the drunk to the rat catcher to like it just, I think there were, what did I say? Maria helped me paint these. It was something like 51 miniatures or something.
Yeah, you had a lot. I was singing the intro to Beauty and the Beast. I was singing Belle while we were setting it up that morning, because there goes the baker, like with his tray, like, and then like there was even little chickens and stuff. It was amazing.
There was a flock of chickens. There's like a little kid stealing an egg, and the flock of chickens coming after him. Like, it's a really good set, and thank goodness Maria was able to help me with that, and we just powered through painting the entire set of Morsane, so that when everybody sat down, there it was, the sheriff's office at the end of the main street lined with buildings, and then just peppered everywhere, the living, breathing town of Morsane, and then put it in danger and try to destroy it. So the heroes have something to do.
Man, and tell you, that was one of my favorite. We're going to go to this next, but one of my favorite moments was going there to the room early with you and helping you set up. And then you had the music playing. You had the same music that you had on this when we were playing on Roll20, and you had hidden the speaker, so it sounded like it was just coming in from the room. And breakfast was set up, and we had a separate round table, so the food wasn't with game. So we had long table for the game, and then in the room we had a circular table where all the food where we had all the food and sat and had breakfast together. And then both of those had big giant windows that overlooked the strip. So I mean, it was maxed out. And one of my favorite moments was
there was like everyone... a countertop on one end where I was able to set up all my stuff. Having the stuff was funny. So I had to drive to Vegas because I had so much stuff. I had boxes and boxes of miniatures and buildings and monsters and all this stuff. And so the car was packed, and I put all of that stuff on one of those luggage racks like 4 times, right? To like get it in, to get it to the room, to get it out of the room, to get it back to the car at the end.
Well, let's say actually 5 times. I'm going to pause and tell this very funny story. We initially were looking at the M Resort, which is another one of my favorite locals, quote unquote locals casinos. They had really great room rates. Before we looked into Red Rock gave us a little bit better price, but we were looking at M Resort. That was where we were landing because the rate of the rooms were so much better. But then Red Rock got back to us and said, oh, it's, the minimum per person was smaller and made it more affordable. So we landed on Red Rock. I reserved all the rooms, and I had my name all the rooms because I reserved them. And then I added everyone's names, blah, blah, blah. And I get a call. Rob and Adam carpooled together, which I think you're going to talk about in a minute, but you carpooled together. We're here at the hotel. And then I get a call from you saying, they're having trouble finding our reservation. And I said, that's really weird. It should just be under my name and your name. Let me go figure this out. So I go down I'm like right there playing blackjack. So I cash out and I go down the escalator, and no Rob, no Adam. And here comes a few of the others that are like, where Rob and Adam are? They said they're here at the lobby. And I went, So I called Rob. What hotel casino are you at? Well, I'm at the M Resort.
I'm at the M Resort, of course. That's what's been on my calendar for 3 months.
Standing there with your luggage rack full, with a bellhop with your luggage rack full of all the game pieces, and your car gone to valet.
The car was already gone to valet. They had brought us sparkling waters while we waited for check-in, because surely they thought it was their fault. We're so sorry, Mr. Cooper. Please have a seat. Would you like some water? Blah, blah, blah. Oh my God.
So count it 5 times that you had to,
6, because I had to take it out and back.
That's right. Anyways, that was just a fun story, but,
well, I did not know that story was going to get told on the podcast.
Why wouldn't we? The whole weekend was magical. That's just another magical part of it. it makes sense why it happened, because that was where we landed first. And when you put it on your family calendar, that's where it put, and then you just never updated it. And, you know,
and I use the calendar. I don't know if you're the same way. I use the calendar to open maps. Like wherever 100%. I'm going, I'll just open the calendar event and hit the location on there, and then the map turns on and I go.
100%. That's what I do. So I don't blame you for that happening at all. But, I loved everyone walking in for breakfast about 9 o'clock, strolling in from the late night of the steakhouse and seeing all the food. And, you know, we had the curtains closed at first and in costume, putting down their stuff, and just them seeing more sane in person for the first time was really cool.
Yeah. That meant a lot to me, because I worked hard on it. I had pictured it and I was ready for that moment, and to see everybody come in costume, like all happy and excited to play. And then immediately all the phones came out and pictures started being taken. I was like, yes, did it.
And the game went really well. The 3 acts went really well. They ended in a good amount of time.
We had to be like, had that room till 5 o'clock, and damned if that game didn't end at 4:58. And I didn't cheat it. Like it really happened.
We got to that third act, and you brought out the big guys, the big finals. And one of them being
any of our listeners who play D&D, there was a Tarask and there was a clockwork mecha Tarask as well that Mr. Cairo was piloting like Voltron.
You know, my only regret, I had that one last wish spell, and I wanted to end my game with our cool in the way I almost started it. I was going to teleport myself into the cockpit where Cairo was and punch him in the face. But, you know, Kim maxed it out. Holiday maxed it out and brought him down before I had a chance to.
And Mariachi, they kind of worked. The spellcasters kind of decided once they saw what they were up against, they're like, okay, do a little mental count of the legendary resistances.
Yes.
And let's just start throwing spells and
make them use them.
They had just enough.
Yep. Just enough for Holiday to cast Banish one more time and have it actually work. And before then, you know, the Tarask had destroyed buildings and permanently altered all of us because of the amount of townsfolk that died. And I mean, it got really, really sketchy there at the end. It was a really well played game on all accounts.
I had put in an extra mechanic as the town was being destroyed and beloved members of the community died, that there would be trauma, right, for our characters. And so there were permanent effects to their stats and hit points and stuff as those happened, and saving throws were failed, just to give a little bit more urgency and a little bit more weight to that situation.
You know, and it forced us to do that thing of being in person and communicating with each other. Mm-hmm. Don't go there because I'm like kind of metagaming as we say, but yeah.
The metagaming in person. So it was probably the best game the group ever played as far as tactics and speed of play and fun because of that back channel. Right?
Yes.
When it's your turn, you want to stay in character. You want to do your turn thing. When you're having a social encounter, you want to stay in character. You want to, talk to people the way it is. When it's Annalise's turn and, Kim and Alice are whispering to each other about what they're doing on their next turn and coordinating, that's the way it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. That's part of the game. Part of some of the frustrations that I think we would have during the Zoom game is that back channeling can't happen in real time unless you're like really text messaging like crazy or whatever. It's like, oh, now it's this person's turn. And then that turn became their opportunity to have those little side conversations you would normally have around the table. And it kind of would grind things to a halt at points.
Right. And sometimes on the online stuff, we would like text, but someone wouldn't get the text. So like you'd see the screen, like someone pointing to their phone, or we try to use the Zoom chat, but if you don't see the pop-up, you can miss it. Or someone decided, oh, it's so-and-so's turn. I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the bathroom or go get a snack and blah, blah, blah. So they'd miss that, they were being asked questions on the side. So yes, it was definitely that, you called it back channel, if that's what it's called in D&D, that just being able to do that, like, hey, and get some feedback. Especially I sat next to Adam at one point I can't remember if it was the whole game. I think so. Maybe. I don't remember. But at some point,
to me, then Adam and you on that side.
Yeah. And I was like, what is it? And he was like, oh yeah, don't forget, like you can do this, this, and this. And like, it was very helpful to be next to someone who was so experienced. So game went perfect. I loved it.
Just perfect. It couldn't have gone better. I felt like I prepped a ton and it was worth it. And I had everything written out. Even that night, like after the steakhouse, I was like, I could write some more dialogue for Angron. Nice. I scribbled all over it and stuff. I was up late. I was genuinely excited and like staying up late, putting those final touches on it and stuff. I just couldn't wait. It was really fun.
Let's talk about some of your favorite parts of the weekend. I'll start this one and say, I think one of my favorite parts, besides me maxing it out and like my new boss said, you need to be refreshed for the year, take an extra day off. So I stayed a day longer. I didn't fly out till Monday morning. So I had all day Sunday just to hang out and chill. Since we finished the game and had to pack up the room right about 5:00, we all went back to our rooms and, got out of costume, whatever, dropped off our stuff. And we met in one of the lounges afterwards. And we each toasted to our characters that we had played for 3 years and got to level 20 and talked about our level 20 boons and what the epilogues were for our characters. Right. I really liked that part. That was really great. Kim
brought a big chunky D20. And so once we got to the bar and all settled in, it was like, all right, go around the table, roll initiative. And I never had to go first and talk about their epilogue for their character and where they thought that how, the rest of their lives would go after this harrowing tale and what their effect on more sane and things would be. And then, like you said, we all toasted to the character and just what a great way to finish, right? What a great finale.
And we went team bowling. That was fun too. We went bowling and hung out. That was one of my favorite moments, was doing the epilogues with everybody.
I mean, the whole weekend was pretty magical, honestly.
It really
was something special. But Adam and I carpooled to Vegas, so that's a good long drive. And we listened to a Dungeons and Dragons audiobook. We listened to the Book of Strahd, because he had never. I mean, that's one of my favorite novels. I think it's going to come up later this season, but it's a novel and it's also part of the game. Like in the campaign of like Ravenloft, one of the items you have to find before you can fight Strahd is the Tome of Strahd, which is his journal, and to learn about him and stuff so that you can face him later. That journal is how this novel is written. It's the Journal of Strahd. So I think that's really cool. And so I've read that book a bunch of times. So it's not great, but it's a favorite. And so we listened to that on the way, which was fun because we're playing in that campaign that Michael's running and blah, 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 blah. But we also you can only listen to an audiobook for so long before it kind of starts droning or whatever. So okay, pause that. What do you want to talk about? Let's talk about this restaurant. So we were geeking out over the menu and look at what are you going to order? What steak are you going to get? Oh, I'm getting that tomahawk. I don't care. Is there a side that they light on fire? I want something where they light it on fire, just going nuts and talking about all the cool stuff that we were going to get and getting hyped for it. I mean, we did have that detour at the M hotel, but we all got there a little early before dinner. And so there was kind of a impromptu happy hour that we did at the hotel as well. That's right. And so we got all the stuff loaded and stuff. And Adam and I walked down to the bar where we were having that happy hour. And that made it so real to see everybody there finally in person, look them in the eye, give them a hug. I was like, we did it. Like it's, whatever happens
this is happening
this point out, like we all made it out here, we all committed and we made it here together. And that was just incredible. I mean, I've only seen Michael twice in my life before that, like in person. Right. So that was just awesome. Yeah. Playing at the table and seeing people's investment and getting excited about the table. Like I mentioned, like even during the game, people jumping up and looking at where their character was. And well, if I shoot here, how much distance do I have over there? And this kind of stuff. And also I'm going to take a picture of my custom painted miniature, like over the town and stuff, and just taking those kind of pictures and seeing the investment and how much happiness I was able to bring to that group by getting this far. Definitely the first 1 through 20 game I've ever run in all of my decades of Dungeons and Dragons playing.
Right.
So, it couldn't have gone better. And that's what I think. It's like, I did it. bucket list item, ran a 1 through 20 campaign and had the finale in Vegas in the most like maxed out way possible, bringing happiness to all my friends and sharing it together. It's amazing.
There isn't a single thing the entire weekend that I would change. Everything was just right on. And you know, sometimes you do group of friends travel and there's a little bit of drama or there's a little bit of like, I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to go do my own thing. And it was none of that. We were all in lock and just hanging out together. There isn't a single thing that I wouldn't do again. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
That was our next question. So
yeah.
Yes. And I don't know. I would be hesitant to say, yeah, let's do it again. That was a lot. I don't know that that'll ever happen again. I don't know, not. Especially now that we've done it, because there was at some point, I don't know if you felt this way. At some point, I felt like there was a sense of like a fiduciary duty to complete this campaign, even though it was hard and people stopped showing up and it was, you know, people moved away. Like, I mean, both you and Kim moved to different cities in the middle of this, and there was all kinds of just like scheduling conflicts and all this stuff and canceled games. And do we let it like, do I really want to keep yes, we got to do it. I got a duty to these people. We got to finish it. And I don't know if we tried to do it again, if we could.
You're not wrong. I don't know. I guess I don't mean necessarily like the 1 through 20 thing again, but if we had a campaign that had a big finale, even if it was, you know, just level 5 through 10 or something, I would do a weekend like this again where we're playing a finale. Or I know you kind of started to say, maybe I can do this thing that we can play a certain amount of acts over a weekend. It doesn't have to be as big as Vegas. We could be somewhere, someone's house that we come in and play over the course of a weekend, and then a few months later meet again. Like something like that would be totally cool. And then a big finale. Like I would save up to do a big finale like that in Vegas or in Tahoe or in. I mean, I'd do Red Rock again in a heartbeat. I'm trying to think, what else can I do? What other kind of like event can I do in Red Rock and invite a bunch of people? Because it was just so much fun.
It was super fun. Like there's no doubt about that. My hesitancy is not because it was fun. It was because it was so perfect. I don't think I can replicate it.
You don't want to.
And I think there was something, I think there's a part of that was the difficulty of it, the specialness of it, like the way it started in, you know, in that pandemic where people were just trying to figure out what to do and then sticking with it past, you know, like we're coming up to the end of a campaign in our Saturday game. Do we want to go fight the dragon at a big thing in Vegas? It's like, no, I'm not going to spend all that time and money to do that because it just doesn't happen. It's great. And I love playing in that campaign, but it's not the same investment. You know what I mean? Like it's not. I
agree with you, but also what pops into my head is like, our Saturday game has Andrew in it, so taking Andrew to Vegas doesn't make much sense.
Okay.
But no, I hear what you're saying. You know, and I think you talked about like a fiduciary responsibility to finish the game. I can't speak for others. I grew really attached to my character, and I wanted to see my character through the level 20 if my character survived through it, right? Like there was a couple of times our crew almost like died, right? I have 2 frowny faces and, you know, Team No Consequences, our cleric came through at the end. I was going to leave the campaign if our cool died. I wasn't going to make up another character and start at like level 16 or whatever. And that happened a couple times in the later levels because as much as Luther was the tank, our cool as the monk also would run right in.
I have this trouble with a high level rogue that I've played too. It's like I always win initiative. So I'm always the first one to run in the room. And then I just get absolutely herb stomped until it's other people's turns.
Right. And then the second piece to it is, and we don't have to go into big detail about this, but Luther actually was turned to dust very early in level 19. He was dead.
Rolled up to Vegas. Like, I was like, so I don't get to come to Vegas? What's up?
Someone thought about bringing a bag of sand to represent him on the table. Like, he was dust. And
he got disintegrated.
I wanted to see that through. Right. I was going to find a way to get to Vegas to see that through.
I had that already. There were 2 ways that could go for sure. And we wanted to kind of play it up and have some drama about it of like, hey, this character is a redemption paladin. They found their redemption. They found their peace and they died. Are you going to bring them back? Is that the right thing to do? And hopefully it felt like there was a choice there because there was. I had the Sheriff Coleman stat block like ready to go. If you guys decided like, you know what? Maybe
we're going to let him
go and let him be at peace. I was just going to slide that over to Adam. All right, here you go, buddy.
You're Sheriff Coleman. Well, and we had the game, level 20 game in Vegas started with our cool throwing a stoic fit about having the weight of responsibility of this journal and reading some of the journal to the team and saying, he's at peace. What do we do? And then funny part of this, talk about like quality role playing. I think everyone stepped up being in person. Here comes Josh with his elf with no name saying, well, I'm a gambling man. And he rolls some dice and he just goes, thumbs down.
It was like a 1 or 2 or 3 or something. He just like thumbs down.
Thumbs down. Yeah, just right in his characters. Obviously, he didn't say thumbs down. We're saying that because we're on the podcast, but it was just all boop. And, moved on and we had this discussion and we end up bringing him back. And there was this beautiful role play with you and Adam about Luther in a heavenly experience with his deceased wife and deceased son and having the peace of his redemption. And you even gave him the decision whether or not to follow the light to come back to life. It was the first maybe 20, 30 minutes of the start of the campaign was just so good. So good. I really appreciated that.
Well, then there was the punchline. Like he got outvoted and he decided to come back and Josh goes, hey, maybe we just don't mention anything about that.
About the dice roll. That was great.
Classic.
Oh, it was so good. So do it again. I get your hesitation on that. You're right. It was such a good weekend. I might just have to go back to Red Rock and just hang out there myself. I mean, I like that place in the first place. When I lived by there, we went there a lot, not necessarily to gamble, but like I said, Vegas is a little bit better now in the neighborhoods, having restaurants that are not in the casino. But at the time, like if we wanted to go to a fancy steakhouse, we walked through the casino to get to a fancy steakhouse. So, we wanted to go to a movie. There weren't standalone. I think there's still not standalone movie theaters. There may be one or two at bigger malls, but you go to your locals casino and go to the movie theater there. So I would love another weekend like this. Should we ever have the opportunity to get together and play some big finale, I'd do it again.
That was our big summer. That was our nerd travels. That was the end of our big D&D game. That was the nerdiest thing we did all summer. I feel like I've said my final thoughts on it. Was there anything else that you wanted to?
No, it's a really great way to kick off nerd travels and hopefully get you maybe jazzed up to try a few more. Here we are again, Rob. What's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
Oh man, I had a really good week. I have a nephew. His name is Henry. He's 7. His whole life, he's been coming over to Uncle's house and just looking around the nerd room at all the crazy, weird, cool stuff that I've got here in my display cases and those kinds of things. And he was at an age where a month ago or so, he was over here and he was looking through things and flipping through some books for the first time. It's like you kind of look at the miniatures in the display case and stuff, but then he kind of started looking through some of the books and talking about things and like, when can I play a Dungeons and Dragons game? It's like, oh, buddy, I've been waiting for 7 years for you to ask me that question. So got with his dad. We scheduled it for a couple weeks out and we did not use 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons rules. We used a system called RPG Kids. RPG Kids is by Enrique Bertrand. And I picked up this rule set on Drive-Thru RPG. He's got the basic rules that come with an introductory adventure. There's also a supplement of adventures that I think are like 5 more. They are designed to be young kid friendly. In this first adventure, it's kind of funny, like you're in a town and the sheriff gives you a mission to do. I was like, oh really? Well, he's also a platinum dragonborn with a star and a shield. So Sheriff Colvin gave them the mission that, the evil wizard that lives in the mountains had been turning townspeople into frogs up in his like little cave and stuff. And so they got to go through the forest. They got to go through the cave. They got to fight the guy. The rule system is real light and very straightforward. And I thought really fun. You get 4 choices. You can be the sword fighter, the archer, the healer, or the wizard. Everything is based on a D12, right? It's just, you roll a D12 and you try to beat the other guy. So if you're the sword fighter and you're attacking me, well, you have a sword, so you get a +1 to your D12 roll, and I'm a goblin, so I'm just going to roll my defense against you. So you roll a 7, that's an 8. I roll the 6 for my defense. You hit me. I can get hit twice. I can be hurt or I can be knocked out. So every bad guy, you kind of got to hit twice and like, oh, that guy's already hurt. That guy, oh, he's knocked out. Same thing with the players. They can be hurt and they can be knocked out. The healer, interesting mechanic, the healer just has a burst effect. Every square around the healer, so 8 squares around the healer are affected. They just kind of like pop with radiant energy. If there's a bad guy, they take a damage. If it's a good guy, they get healed 1. So if you're knocked out, you get to hurt. If you're hurt, you get back up to full. And that's that. And then the wizard it was just a little too boring for me because it was basically the same as the archer. The archer gets a +1 on its range because it's got a bow. The wizard gets a plus range on its range because it like shoots a little ball of fire. So I, of course, have all these assets. So I grabbed another system that has this huge list of 100 spells that don't really have any mechanics. They're just names of spells. And so, of course, new players always choose the wizard. If you're interested in D&D, like classic mistake, wizard's always the hardest character to play.
Right.
But the new players always want to play a wizard, right? So he came in, he wanted to be the wizard. I'm like, cool. Fundamentally, the most important thing, I taught him how to roll a D100 with the 2 10-sided dice. Adults still can't figure that out, but he's got it. And he rolled randomly for 4 spells. And we wrote them down. And then it was up to him to just be creative and figure out what those spells meant to him and how we could use them in the game. And sure enough, did he. Like, just absolutely had a wonderful time with him playing this wizard and going through. His dad played, he played, and then Andrew and Maria played. So we had all 4 things and we ran through and defeated the wizard and turned the townsfolk back from frogs. And it went great. So I was real happy about that. And if he wants to play again, I got 5 more adventures ready to go.
Nice. First of all, that's super cool. Does it seem like he's into it enough that he might ask again?
I think so. I mean, I know that he went straight home and got out like paper and pencils and started drawing and making his own character sheets, that matched the ones we went so that he could start running games for his mom and dad. And like,
how fun.
I think it hooked him pretty good. All right. How about you? What's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
I did a lot of research and asked for help on how to zhuzh up the nerd room with some LED lighting.
Oh, yeah.
And there's 2 pieces to it. This is IKEA furniture. One of them is the Calyx box. So it's just
very popular for board game nerds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's what board game nerds and like online content say. This is one of the shelves you can get if you want to store your board games. It's blocks, right? It's squares of shelving. So you can't take an LED strip and just run it across the top of it because there is a board blocking you all the way down.
Okay.
Your squares.
You'd have to drill holes or do something.
Or like drill and put the strip through it or something like that. I could put it on the very back and it would illuminate the back and would hit the light from the wall would hit some of the box, but that didn't seem like it'd be great. And the other 2 shelves I have aren't Calyx. They're bookshelves, but with sliding glass doors. So same thing. In order to get lighting in there, I'll have to drill a hole in the back to get the wire out. But how do I go from shelf to shelf to shelf without it just being right? I don't want 3 different remotes for each.
No.
It's just a lot of research I had to do. And I think I figured out the shelves with the doors, but I haven't done that part yet. I did find an LED light for the Calyx box in which they are strips that are exactly a foot long, which is perfect for the Calyx length. And then they're attached by a wire. And the wire's so many centimeters long or whatever, so many inches long. And then they came with little clips to kind of bind the wire so you don't have wire sticking everywhere. So
that's great.
So each one of those strips fit in right under the Calyx box. So it's lighting up whatever's on the shelf below it. The little clips stick onto the back so that the wires hide behind the vertical shelf. Then the final wire, they put another clip so that it just leads it down the side of the thing and then it's plugged into the back and no wires exposed. And I have LED lighting on the Calyx shelves. So that was a very nerdy project. It took a long time to research and figure it out.
Okay, I'm going to need your help because I've always wanted to have that on the back of my cupboards, like kind of illuminating from behind. But I have that same question where I've got a row here, but then there's a door in between the next row.
Right.
So it was like, well, I don't want those just sitting there. So do I like stick it to the wall above the door and then like tape over it with white tape or something? Like that sucks.
Right.
So I might need to pick your brain a little bit about
I'll show you what I landed on. Even when I ordered it, I only ordered one strip, by the way. The other one's coming now because I just ordered one to see if it would work.
Right.
I plugged it all in, make sure it all worked. And then I moved the box and I moved the calyx shelf out away from the wall. And I was like, before unsticking it, how is this going to work and work the mechanics? I didn't even know that it was going to work until I actually was physically trying to put it together. And then I went, oh, this is totally going to work. So then I started peeling off the strips and wiping down the counter and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And I shared some pictures on my personal social media. I think it came out really good.
Awesome.
And yeah. And now the calyx boxes are maxed out. I have a lot of games and I don't know how that happened. I honestly, I was like, oh, well, this is it. Cause I haven't really bought a lot of games, but then the Game Steward had their sale in June. I bought 2 things, but one of them, which is really nice about the Game Steward and companies that offer you the Kickstarter exclusives. Mm-hmm. So I got the Munchkin D&D game.
Yeah, that looks cool. That'll be fun.
The box of holding and the expansion and so that's like 4 boxes. And then I got, what's the other one I got? After we played Mansions of Madness, you sent a list like these games are like Mansions of Madness if you like them. So I got Eldritch Horror, which by the way, I found a Felder organized box for it. So I might ask you to combine it and I'll pick it up next time I'm in town. Because I'm either paying for shipping or you get to the point where you have free shipping.
I'm buying tons of those things.
You're buying them like
once a month, made a mistake. I made a big order at the beginning of this month, but I didn't realize one of the things that I chose is for a newer game. So it's a pre-order and that pre-order is stopping the entire order of everything I want. So I did like the Conan stuff and the Star Wars stuff, like all of this stuff. I was like, oh, you know what? I didn't order last month. That gives me magical permission to order like 4 things this month. And now they're being held up by a pre-order.
Oh man, you can't call them and just take the pre-order. I mean, I guess if you still want it, why would you? Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer. But yeah, there's that one's all cards. There are no minis in Eldritch Horror at all. So yeah, so that's that, but that'll be somewhere down the line. And then there are 2 games out right now that I want. It's the Come On game, Stranger Things Upside Down. And there's a new game based off the movie Scream coming up that actually utilizes your cell phone and calls you as if you are in the movie, which I am super stoked for. But
that's one of those ones that you play like with the lights out, but like candles around the room to like really freak yourself out.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. That's one thing we did that was really cool. When I ran through the Curse of Strahd D&D campaign, that was like, all right, turn off the lights, light up the candle. I had like the little electric candles and stuff that we put around and do all this stuff because it was like gothic horror, baby. Let's get freaked out.
I do that when I play Final Girl. I get super spooked out. I haven't won a game of Final Girl at all. I get slaughtered every single time, but I love playing it. I've got like spooky music, like instrumental horror movie music playing, and I got the lights all out. I got the LED lights on around me, like it's all turned to red. It's great. I love it.
Ooh, I should find, at one point I had found, it might have been a Reddit thread or it might have been a separate website where people had curated playlists for board games specifically.
Nice.
So it was like oh, you're playing Gloomhaven? Here's a Gloomhaven playlist to put on in the background. There was a folklore one, which was why I was like, I found it.
A few changes and additions to our content this season as we add our podcast to the Patreon family so we can pay our podcast bills this year. We will continue to have new episodes every other week with some fun, nerdy stuff in between for subscribers. On our next episode, we are going into the library and checking out our favorite books to share with our listeners. And in between now and then, well, check out our Patreon page for more. Remember to subscribe, share, and give us that 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media platforms at NerdBestFriends or send a message by writing podcast@nerdbestfriends.com. I'm going to go plan more nerd travels for us, Rob. I don't care what you say.
All right. I suppose these miniatures will be back for me to paint when I get back.
I'm just saying, we're going to go have some fun. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. Check us out on Patreon. We'll see you next episode.
Talk to you next time.
And of course, I lost myself in my rage. I feel I have let our cool Peter and every part of this family down. I am tied to these brigands and murderers because I am a brigand and a murderer, and I made sure the gang remembered it. I have not felt rage that strong in years. I beat Jesse until my knuckles bled, and then I shoved as much ancient gold down his lying throat as I could get my hands on. Turns out after all this living I've been doing, I'm still the same old Luther. playing for a different team. All their brains, schemes, cunning, and prowess got them nothing but a patch of dirt. Worse than that is the trouble of I believe the gang, and by association myself, have caused our cool. I feel the first time our cool left here was not on the best of terms, and this can only have made things worse. And all of this makes me think if I had accomplished anything, I showed my true colors to Peter, caused damage for our cool and their homeland, and the only thing I am sure of is that I will never be able to see my family again with my death. I only hope that when I do inevitably make my way to hell, it is fiery and terrible. Otherwise, I'll feel I've been sold a false bill of goods.